Satnam, Satnam, yogis, yoginis, and numerologists, those who love numbers, welcome to the beginning of number 5. I'm very excited today. It's a new number. We are starting something fresh, something anew. We've been through 10 videos exploring number 7, and we didn't touch too much on numbers because we had to deal with the mind first of all. We came also from another course on the mind, but we have talked enough about the mind that we are now ready to move into number 5. And hopefully it will make sense why we spent so long talking about number 7 before we went into number 5. But today we're going to start this transition, and I'm excited for that. I think it's one of the nice moments when we are starting to go deeper into the numbers. 5 is really when we're going to go deep into that. Satnam, Infinite Stories, good to see you here. Welcome. We're going to go into number 5 today. So we spent 10 videos on number 7, and hopefully a few things were very clear. Number 7 being linked to the mind, and we had to explore the many ways in which the mind plays games with us. What we will see is that because whenever we approach any new topic that we want to study, we approach from the mind, from what we already know. This is, you look at something and the first thing that triggers is the mind. As you are appreciating something new and the mind is thinking, well, that kind of connects to something else that I know and connects to that other thing. And then we start creating like ideas of where these things are going, presuppositions and projections and fantasies and all sorts of things that if we just operate from there, they don't allow us to perceive what's coming in with a fresh look, let's say. So it is very relevant that as we are going to approach a new topic, numerology, if maybe you already studied numerology, if in that case, even more important that we go through the 7 first, because if you have already studied something about numbers, there's a lot of presuppositions of what you think you already know. And so coming into this, you think you know some things, and you know some things you do, and some things you think you do. And then as you approach this, and Karam Kriya is maybe new to you, so the presuppositions are going to get in front, and they're going to be obstructing the perception. So we had to talk about this number 7, but there's also another thing. When we approach anything from the perspective of the 7, if you remember, the 7 feels like he is in the top of the class. Number 7 was the platform of elevation. We sit on top of the 7 and we look at the world and we feel superior to the world somehow. Let me see if I can find the first diagram where we did that. Is the place from where we look at the world. Here it is. You remember? 7 is the number of the 7 colors, is vision, so it's looking, and we sit on top of the platform and we look at the world and we think this is the top, this is the highest we can get, because number 7 does not perceive what is beyond 8 and 9. Last week we were doing some videos on death. If somebody hasn't seen them, it's very, very recommended, very interesting topic, death, and it's associated to number 8. 8 is the infinity, so dying is going into the infinite. So when you are in the perspective of the 7, what is beyond you, you would have to cross death to perceive the 9 that is beyond. So 7 naturally thinks that he is the top. And that's why the mind and the ego is the thing that governs us, because it thinks that is the most important thing in the world. It's not, but it's just not used to seeing beyond that number 8. So having talked about number 8 and number death and what is beyond death, has given us a perception that there is something beyond and that we would want to cross. However, something else happens now then, which is that in numbers, there are natural sequences of events and things that happen. Natural means that they occur in nature. Like 1 leads to number 2, leads to number 3, and leads to number 4. I think it's quite easy to agree that 1, 2, 3, 4 is a natural sequence. 1, 2, 4, 3 would not be a natural sequence. And if we are trying to move through those numbers, 1, 2, 4, 3, it would create some sort of errors or problems in our path. Now, maybe this is a little bit abstract right now because we haven't studied what is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It will become more clear as we advance with the language of the numbers. But for the moment, let's just take it like that. When we start from one number, there is a sequence of numbers that follow through and in a natural way. And we explore that a little bit with this diagram when we were starting. We will explore a bit more, well, quite a bit more of this today and onwards. But let's say, for now, believe me, I will explore how later on in a minute. But for now, believe me that when you start from number 7, which is like the other side of the number 3, then you want to go naturally to the other side of the 1, number 9. So from the 7, you would go to the 9. Well, from 7 to go to number 9, and 9 being the end of the path, the end of the journey, that's too quick. And you haven't even been through the other numbers. So what we have is that when we approach anything in life, particularly a new topic that we are researching, in this case Karam Kriya, and we come from the mind, and because we are in the number 7, the natural impulse would be to go towards the number 9. And we are not ready to do that. And that's why the 7 thinks he's at the top of the class. He is the top of the top. He's the most important thing, because he cannot do that jump to the number 9. In between the 7 and the 9, that's the 8. And he says, no, I cannot do that. So because we cannot do this jump from the 7 to the 9, we have to do something else. So remember, 5 is the point in the middle, and all the numbers connect. 2 and 8, 3 and 7, 4 and 6. So all the numbers are connected to this 5. Yeah, it's like the thumb that is touching all the fingers. So thumb being the number 5. So if the 7 cannot go to the 9, maybe it can go to the 5. And this is why when we begin the sequence of the Karam Kriya, when we study the numbers, first we begin with the 7, because 7 is the mind, and then because we cannot jump to the 9, which would be the natural tendency, we first have to go to the 5. And that's also not only reasonable, but it's also very interesting, because the 5 is going to give us a lot of the proper support for the learning that has to come for afterwards. And let's explore a little bit about this transition from the 7 to the 5, because it's going to be important on when we start touching upon the 5. We will do this today. We're going to see the transition from the 7 to the 5, and then we will start introducing what would be the number 5. It will happen a little bit at the same time, but it's good that we do both things. So number 5, one of the things about number 5 is that we associate it to the 5th chakra. If anybody knows yoga, it's very useful to learn numerology because it's very connected, at least because, Shiv Charan Singh, who developed this system of Karam Kriya, he is a yogi, so he put it into the context of yoga, and yoga supports the teachings of Karam Kriya. So if you know yoga, you know a few things. One of them is that the 5th chakra, number 5, is associated to the throat, and therefore is associated to our words and our communication. So the 5th chakra is also connected to the ears, listening, and words, speaking. So number 5 is the number of the word, the words that we utilize. So when we are, right now I'm communicating something, and you are listening, and you are receiving that communication. So that communication, that's the number 5, the bridge, that is connecting the both of us right now, me and you. And what is behind my words? Well, I'm speaking what is going through my mind. So mind being the number 7, and 5 being the words, right now as I am speaking, actually every time we speak and we utilize our mind in speaking, we are not just grunting or doing some sort of sound. When we are speaking and making sense of that, that's what is happening, 7-5. So the mind, we say, if you remember when we explored number 7 and we said 7 is 7 rays of the rainbow and 7 colors, therefore is vision, and so is images. This means that the primary way of encoding information and understanding information is linked to images. So the mind mainly thinks about images, and then superimposed to that, there is words that we say to ourselves to understand what we are seeing. Now, understanding is something that the mind wants to do. The learning is something that occurs within the 5. Learning, you can find learning in books. Books are made of words. Words is number 5. So the learning that you extract from something that you are seeing, that would be the 5. So 7, and seeing something, and 5, I understand something out of that. So we are doing this transition from the 7 to the 5. I look at something, I see something, I capture the image in my mind, and then 5 is learning something out of that. 7 would be understanding it, and 5 is learning something out of that. So we say that experience is the teacher, but, well, what is the experience teaching us? It's very important to know what we are learning out of that experience. So we have an experience with our mind. Our mind is thinking, and we have, through the number 7 that we have been exploring in the previous course, we have realized how many mind games do we play, how many times the mind has created an obstacle in our path, how many times the mind is trapping us in these mind games. Well, we learn all these habits and these patterns which are karmic, and then what are we learning from that? What is all this learning? What is all this receiving all this new information? What is it giving for us? Because otherwise, if there is no learning, it's just an accumulation of information, and we don't want that. We don't study to accumulate more knowledge. That would be just trying to make our heads bigger, yeah, and it would make consequently as well our ego bigger. That's not our interest. Our interest is to extract some learning out of what we are looking at, what we are hearing, what we are seeing. So, in the same way, when we look at the mind, the mind wants to look at the world and understand things. If we look at the mind and we see all these mind games that we have been playing and how they have trapped us into these habits and these patterns, then what are we learning from that? So, through these last 10 videos that we were exploring number 7, we were always getting to some conclusion. For example, the importance of forgiveness, the importance of letting go of the mind games. These concepts are fundamental to what is going to come next, the 5 that is coming now. Why is it fundamental? Because if we, for example, are operating from a standpoint of insecurity and feeling inappropriate, feeling that we don't know enough, feeling that we don't deserve to know more, these mental traps that are catching us, if we operate from there, then whatever we perceive when we go into meeting the world, remember the meeting is number 5, yeah, there's 2 things, and the thing in the middle, that's the number 5, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so the number 5 is the number in the middle. So between me and the experience that I'm going to meet right now, the meeting of both, that's number 5. So as I come into the meeting with the world, if I come from all these insecurities and feeling inappropriate and feeling I don't deserve and all that, that meeting is going to be tainted. So this is one of the main points that when you read the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali is making at the very beginning of the book. It says the purpose of yoga, and it says that we cannot find the self, we cannot realize ourself, because our mind is tainting our experience. It is these thoughts which are tainting what we are perceiving. So we have to clear these thoughts. Well, to do the transition from 7 to the 5 is this: taking 7, looking at all the things that are happening in my mind, and number 5, because it's the point in the middle, is the point where things turn around. Let me do a little... I think I did already. It's already here when we were introducing. So we are doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So as we see right here, the middle point is the point of something changing. Yeah, we were going up, now something is going down. So the point of change will be number 5. 5 is change. 5 is the number of change. We're going to start building up the language. Language is also 5, yeah, of this number. So 5 is where things change. If 5 is the middle point, is when you look at yourself in a mirror. 5 is the mirror between you and your image that you see on the other side. 5 is the middle point. In a mirror what it does is turns things around as well. When you look at a mirror, right now I'm lifting this hand, my right hand, this is my right hand. But then when I see myself in the screen, it looks like it's my left hand, which is confusing because it turns the things around. If you look at yourself in a spoon, which is kind of like a mirror, you see yourself upside down and left to right. Everything is around, it's the other way around. Everything is changed. So number 5 is the number of turning things around, like in this arch, is the number of turning things around and the number of change. So how appropriate that we just come from the 7 and we figured out all the problems of number 7, all the mind games and all these issues which are trapping us into a karmic existence, a karmic behavior, and 5 is the number of change. So as we are receiving these teachings, 5 is words are teachings. As you are receiving these teachings, as I am speaking and I am sharing them with you through this medium, this communication, that just receiving that 5, those teachings, has the power already to transform, to change the form of number 7. So transforming those mind games. Mind games are the way that we form ourselves, and 5 is the number of transforming. That is reforming and transforming and reform, I don't know. Changing the form in many ways, but 7 would be the thing that forms, that creates some sort of form, and 5 is the thing that changes the form, transforms whatever is happening. So all these things that we have identified in the 7, through these teachings and through the numbers now, this is the beginning of the transformation. So that's very exciting. We had quite a few videos that were kind of putting us down, seeing the many troubles that we have with ourselves and with our minds. And it can be kind of depressing, to be exploring all these things which we don't like. We don't want to feel all those mind games that they make us feel very, very negative. So good news. We started the transformation. That's the great news that comes with the numbers. And we want to transform it so that, for example, it's through these teachings that we start changing this perception that is biased of the world, the tainted thoughts on the world, and we start to incorporate things like forgiveness. So when we bring the forgiveness into ourselves, towards ourselves and towards others, then the new perception that I'm going to be having of the world is going to be more clear. In effect, what it will do is this other thing that we explored, taking the 7 from in front of us to putting it behind us. So that's a change as well. That's a number 5. You see, by starting with this forgiveness to ourselves and changing our expectations and our fantasies, we are putting the 7 behind us. So that's like a mirror of the 7. So you can see that's number 5. And if you have already started doing that through this course that we started with number 7, that's because we were talking about it. So I was saying something of the teachings, that's number 5. You would hear it, and you would start allowing that 5 to transform yourself, and you would speak to yourself to let it transform your mind, and maybe initiate a process of forgiveness, for example. If you felt shame or you felt guilt in your life, through us talking about it, you can start changing and transforming. So you see how the 5 has already begun, even though we were not talking about it on the 7. The part when I was identifying the mind games, that would be 7. The part when we started to talk how to transform those mind games, that was already the 5. But we didn't talk about it. It was happening in the background. So that's a very, very interesting thing. How we receive the teachings and how we start talking to our minds to change what's happening in the minds. I just said something, I don't know if you noticed it, but I talked about how you talk to your minds. Because normally we say, speak your mind. That's a very common sentence in English to say, speak your mind, say what you are thinking. Well, we say, in yoga, we say, don't speak your mind, because the mind is full of rubbish. The mind is full of garbage. We explore the levels of consciousness and how much garbage does it accumulate in the subconscious Today is a little bit a brief review of the things that we have been seeing. So you will remember the drawing of the ocean. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, of course, it's not here. Okay, I was checking the diagrams on number 7, but it's not here. This is a diagram that you can find in the last course we did on the mind, and it's called Levels of Consciousness. So if you haven't watched that one, I recommend it, because actually that's going to be fundamental to, I will get it out for the next video. That's fundamental to number 5, because we talked about it in that course that there is 5 levels of consciousness. And of course, now we are going to the number 5, and we will explore how number 5 are many things which are 5. One of them is levels of consciousness. So it will be interesting to know that concept on the levels of consciousness when we're going to explore the number 5. But yes, we have accumulated a lot of garbage in the subconscious, and therefore we have to clear. If we speak from there, if we speak our minds, that's going to come out through our words. And that's how we very often create karma. We say what we think. We don't stop ourselves from just saying it. There is no in-between filter that is going to stop it, and it just comes out, and then we create karma. Yeah, we create karma by our actions, our words, and our thoughts. So already by thinking it, we were literally already creating karma, but it's like one level more abstract. The moment that you say it, it becomes much more real. The moment that we do something, it becomes even more. And all these 3 levels create karma, but of course there's more heavier karma the more you come down to the actual action. You can see these 3 things in this. This is what we think, what we say, and what we do. Actually, we have a video on this as well. Again, today is a little bit reviewing what we have been seeing. So what we think, what we speak, and what we do, those are the 3 levels of karma. So if you just speak your mind, already by the mind being so full of garbage, it's already creating karma. So in yoga we say, don't speak your mind, speak to your mind. And this is what we have been doing also in the last 10 videos, because when we would talk about mind games, and then you identify one that you don't like, and we would start exploring how to tell our minds to stop doing that. So if I'm playing a mind game which is, I feel that I'm not good enough, every time that I will feel that thought coming up, I will stop myself and I will say to my mind, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to play that game. So by speaking to the mind, that would be the 5 to the 7. Rather than the 7 to the 5, that would be the 5 to the 7. Then we can apply what we have been learning in the 5, and we transform how we perceive the world from the 7. Hopefully that was clear. Yeah, from the 7 to the 5 and from the 5 to the 7. If there is any doubt, you can ask about that. So through this conversation with our minds, we are putting the 7 behind. We are letting go of many of these mind games, which is also another quality of number 5. We will probably explore this in more detail, but let me actually we did another course, a different course. I could repeat it now, but I feel a little bit silly repeating things when it's already been explored in detail in another video, and I would rather that anybody who wants to just explore that video by itself. So we have another course that it was on the Mool Mantra, and we went through the 10 parts of the Mool Mantra. And Sadnam Mumal Kwazi, welcome to the channel. Thanks for subscribing. So in that course on the Mool Mantra, we explored how the 5th part of the Mool Mantra, that's Ek Onkar Satnam Kartapurak. In Kartapurak, when we explored, we dedicated a whole video to that, and we understood that Kartapurak, the creative being, the virtue of that is sacrifice. And you remember it will be sacrifice of the self in the small letters. Self in capital letters, that's the virus. Yeah, if we sacrifice ourself in capital letters, and rather the virtue would be self-sacrifice. That means to sacrifice the ego. Yeah, sacrifice the false sense of self, the ego. So number 5 is associated to sacrifice as well. If you want to know more about this table, as I mentioned, this was explored, every one of these in one of the videos on the Mool Mantra. But let's just take it back and say, well, by the way, if you go through that video, then this is Karam Kriya. We are seeing every one of these things are aligned with a number. So we will see that there are 10 numbers and the qualities of each one of them. So 5 being sacrifice, when we are saying that we are transitioning from the 7 to the 5, what we are saying is that there is a good number of things from the 7 that need to be sacrificed, coming from our ego and our mind games. So this is the sacrifice of those things which are going to bring us to the little one, which is let me just show it. What is the virtue of number 1? Well, it's humility. So by sacrificing those things that we think we know, and remember how we start from the forgiveness, you see? Number 7, forgiveness. Now you will see that these videos that I did over a year ago now, they all kind of make sense. Now when we come back with the numbers, it will make sense. So 7 would be the forgiveness. We need to forgive, which is a way of giving away all those mind games. That's the sacrifice of the ego self to get to 1. 7, 5, 1, to get to humility. So 7, 5, 1. And humility is necessary because without humility, we cannot be open enough to receive. If we feel from some high position, you're listening to somebody but thinking you know better, you're not going to learn anything and you cannot question what you know. So humility is necessary to start exploring what the numbers have to tell us. There is a lot of teachings coming up from every number that are going to be teaching us things, and if we are not humble enough to receive them, then it's going to be useless. So forgiveness, sacrifice into humility. Does it make sense? Hopefully it does. It's difficult here. I would like to ask you questions on how it went with number 7. I would like to ask you how you received some things. I have some questions which are directed to transitioning from 7 to 5, but because this is not a course, this is just me, an exposition of this, and there's only a few people online. If you are online, feel free to talk. That would be number 5. But because it's not a course, we cannot go deeper. And that's why I would like to remind you today, that whatever we are doing here with Karam Kriya, this is not a valid substitute of an actual training on Karam Kriya. This is more like an introduction to the numbers, getting to know them and exploring them, and they are very beautiful. And this is more about me going on and on about this wonderful thing that I'm passionate about. But if you truly want to bring numbers into your life, there is no substitute for training. So if anybody wants to do a training on that, there is a number of Karam Kriya trainings. There is teachers all over the world, from Australia to America and everywhere in between. And there's also trainings online. My teacher, Shiv Charan Singh, has just started a training this year with number 7 when I started number 7. So if anybody is interested in doing that, I think I really encourage you to join those courses. Here we just interact and we go on, but I call it a course, but it's not a substitute for an actual training face-to-face as well. Because face-to-face and the face is also linked to the number 5. Yeah, you can see 2 eyes, nose, and mouth somehow. You can see this face-to-face is also something that it brings you much more closer to your commitment on understanding this and learning this. And it's when we are face-to-face that I can ask you a direct question to you, and you can reply to it, and there is more an engagement between both sides, and it's therefore more personal and more transforming because you are right there in person. So I just wanted to remind you that. All right, so we have seen, and hopefully it became more clear of why we needed to do this, why we needed to go through the forgiveness and the recognize, accept, and agree, and all those things to clear out the expectations before we actually get to meet number 5. And now we go into number 5. So hopefully you are excited for that. I'm very excited to that. And when we see the 7 linking to the 5 and 7 being vision, in a way, this is telling us, look at 5, look at the 5, look at the 5. Because 5 is we say if it would be the most important thing. If you read Guru Nanak's words, he will sometimes say that you can do many rituals of purification, you can do many yogic practices, you can do many pujas and many whatever you want. But at the end of the day, are you repeating the Naam? Are you vibrating the Naam? Are you feeling the breath? Yeah, feeling the name of God within you. Yeah, we can see it in all traditions. I was just mentioning Guru Nanak, but you can see it in Christianism. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word is God. So the words are God, G-O-D, this generating, organizing, and destroying principle. So we generate through our words. We organize through our words. We destroy with our words. And if we don't pay attention to our words, then we can create all sorts of troubles in our life. So look at your words. Look at what's happening through your words. And even though before I said, don't speak your mind, think before you speak. Okay, I'm not saying say whatever comes out through your mouth and don't even think about it. I'm not saying that. Definitely think before you speak, but don't just speak your mind. So we talk about how important words are. If we associate them to God, imagine, words are supremely important. So we encourage that if I may say so, that can you swallow your words as you are speaking them? Utilizing this language. Can you swallow your own words? How do they taste as you are speaking? I would bet you that if we paid more attention to the taste of our words as they are coming out through our mouth, we would choose more carefully what we say. That implies consciousness, yeah? Choosing what we say, that implies consciousness. Now, the whole training of Karam Kriya, all the attention to words or to numbers, is because it starts with the language. 5 is the language, and the first thing we are doing is learning the language of numbers. Learning Karam Kriya, learning numerology is not different from learning another language. I think I used that metaphor before in the introduction. If you want to learn Spanish, you may start learning a few words, some vocabulary. Hola, ¿qué tal estás? ¿Cómo va? ¿Cómo lo llevas? Some basic words you have to understand. But before you try to make big, long sentences, you just have to understand some words. Now that's like in numbers, trying to see, what is this number? What is the other number? What is 2? What is 3? What is 4? Before trying to make a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4. But the whole process of learning what is 1, what is 2, is kind of like learning a language. So by learning numbers, what we actually do is we pay incredible attention to our language. By learning numbers, we pay an extraordinary attention to our language and recalibrating the language so that sometimes we use words in a very open way. This is number 5, by the way. All of that I'm saying is connected to number 5 because 5 is language. So this is very relevant to number 5. And I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to challenge myself. For every word that I say, I keep checking myself. What word am I using and which number does that word have? Does it make sense to say it? All of this is happening within me as I am speaking. And I challenge you to do the same when you are learning this, to pay a lot of attention to the language. And when we use it during the day, notice, is that language coherent? Is it also harmonious? Does it make sense? Is it even necessary? And we're going to find that there is a number of rules of communication that are going to help us not to create so much karma in our lives and to hold on more steady to the Dharma. We are going to explore this in number 5. Number 5 being the number of language and communication. We're going to explore communication quite a bit. And that's a fascinating topic. I love that topic. And so that's, I'm excited that we are going to go into those things. And as I mentioned, particularly paying very close attention to how we have corrupted our language and we forgot the actual meaning of words. And maybe it's not about understanding what the word means, because you can go to a dictionary. The dictionary is already corrupt. You talk about intellect and it sounds like intelligence. It's not the same. Instincts sound like intuition. It's not the same. We go into humility and we end up humiliated. We go into service and we end up in servilism. We go into innocence and we end up being naive. So where did we cross the line? How often do we try to explore a virtue and we fall into the virus? And that's mainly because we haven't drawn a clear line of boundary of where one thing transforms into something else. And we use a word to say something, and it could mean completely different things to different people. If I say stress is such a wide word. It can mean so many things to different people. We will have to define it. If I say love, what does that mean? What kind of love? What do you mean by love? Okay, you love me? Okay, what does that mean? Because when we use that word, we express so many different things on different levels, and we could even say on different chakras that we will have to be more clear about it. So we need to pay a close attention to the words that we use and understand the numbers that are behind. Because when we are saying, like in word love, and operates from the language of the heart, it's very different from love operating from the second chakra, which is more about needing the other, and if they are not here, I feel empty and void, and I am very attached to the other person. That's more the language of the second chakra. In the heart would be more about the feeling that I get, that openness and that sensitivity that is expressed in me when I'm with the other one. Well, that's a different kind of love. And how do we know when it's one and when it's the other if they just use the word love? Well, that's when close attention to the language that surrounds the word are going to give us clues on which number is operating. And if I hear a lot of number 2 behind, I know that when they are talking about love, they are talking about the other kind of love. And if I hear more number 4, there will be the other kind of love. So by listening to the language, particularly listening to the numbers behind the language, we can understand better what's happening with the other person and clear out any misunderstanding and clear out any corruption within the language itself, so that we can have a more real conversation. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the objective, to understand the numbers so that when we are communicating and when we are observing the world, looking at the world, we can see the numbers that are there present already, naturally, and that's going to help us understand the world better. Understanding is what the mind wants to do, 7. 5 is the learning. Then what can I learn from this thing that I am understanding from what I'm seeing in the world? So 7 to the 5. This is the transition that we are doing. And in order to do that, we need to build up the language. We need to start incorporating the language of numbers within us. So, let's go into that. Let me hydrate. Hydrate is water. Let's take it from here. 5 elements. Well, let me draw. One of the things that we will do as we move through the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 later on. Yeah, we are doing number 5 now. We will do 10 videos on number 5, and then we will go into number 1, 10 videos on the 1, 10 videos on the 2. This is a big commitment for me, 10 videos on each one of these, but I'm excited for that. Now, when we go into number 1, we will draw one point and we will try to explore what does that mean. But because we're doing number 5, then one thing that we can see with 5 points, and let's remember that if you remember how we were joining the hands, the 5 is the middle point, 1 to 9 is connected, 2 to 8, 3 to 7, 4 and 6. Well, the 10 is the circle. The circle that is the symbol for everything that is perfect, perfection. That's not a perfect circle, but close enough. Well, within the 10, let's situate these 5 points. Now the symbol of the pentagram, it's very useful to study. Karam Kriya is very useful to study many things. I'm sure it appears in alchemy and other concepts, but this is going to be useful also in studying even psychology. It will come later on. And one thing that we already did this when we were doing the introduction on number 7, but we will explore it again here. Let's just do it like this. If I start drawing from here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then the middle point, the highest point, that would be the 5. And starting from here would be 1, we go here to the 2, we go here to the 3, we go here to the 4, and then we go here to the 5. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, there is many things in the world which are 5. And we're going to start exploring those things which are 5 and realize that they are all aligned with this diagram. You can all align them in one way or another with this diagram. Now, the very first one that is easiest to connect is the elements, because I was just drinking water and I just thought, let's go with the elements. But that's one of the most classical ones, because as I mentioned, yoga and Karam Kriya can help each other. And if I understand many people who come into Karam Kriya numerology, they already know something about yoga, or at least something about elements, maybe from another Hindu philosophy, or maybe you studied Reiki, or maybe you studied something else. So many people know about the 5 elements. So that's the easiest way to begin with. Well, how do we associate the elements with these 5 points? And we can see this also with the body, with the human body, with the chakras. So if we draw a little yogi here, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 chakras. And the first 5 chakras correspond to the first 5 elements. And they are, when we were, where was that? That was in the course of the mind, I believe, when we were exploring how the universe comes from something very subtle into manifesting in reality. And as it becomes more gross reality, more material reality, it manifests into these 5 elements, the earth and the water and so on. And we perceive those 5 elements through our 5 senses. And so the lowest 5 chakras in the human body, these main important, the more important ones, there's many chakras, but okay, these 5 very relevant chakras, they will be 5 associated with the elements. And maybe you already know them by heart, but let's explore it slowly. Why one is what? How would it work? Well, one way of looking at the elements linked to the numbers to try to find the order of these elements would be in order of density. So as we go, the most dense of all the elements, that would be earth. I will use this symbol. Like this is earth. Something like where we stand on. That's the most dense of all the elements. Earth is heavy. You can think of a rock, very heavy. In fact, you can think of the planet like a rock, and the planet is what creates, the most heavy, the most dense is what creates gravity around, has gravity around that, so things are being pulled down towards it. So the earth core, that's the very first element. The second element that we find, the second element in terms of density, that's going to be, should I write it next or below? Let me put it below. Water. Let's do some waves. Yeah, you can find this here as well. Let's just think in terms of density. Water is very dense. if you ever try to fill a bag with water and just lifting the bag, it's very, very heavy, which is the reason why we can have boats which float. And you can think of a boat as really heavy things, these boats, but why can they float? Because water is even heavier. Water is really, really heavy. Not as heavy as rock, though. A rock is even heavier. Actually, the rock, like the planet, creates the gravity. You can see how the water can move. It can move down towards the center, to the lowest altitude, let's say, which means that is being affected by gravity. It's very dense, but rock is even lower than that. If you put a pebble, it goes to the bottom. So there would be rocks, then would be the element of water. As we move up from the elements, we come into the element of fire. So fire, we are just looking in terms of density. Fire is also dense in some way. It looks much less dense than water because you can see even the shape of the fire wants to go up and the little sparks want to fly away. But the fire doesn't just go flying. The fire stares down where the source of fuel is. If you are you're making a bonfire, you have some logs and you put fire to them, then the fire is going to stay where the logs are. It's not just going to grab the logs and fly away. So the fire is also dense, even has this shape, which shows that there is a density in the bottom part. Of course, it's much less dense than the water, but still quite dense. Much more dense, at least, than air. Air would be really flying away, yeah? And the sparks of fire want to go into the air, but they are not flying away. I mean, they fly a little bit and they disappear. But air is something that it does float, and this one is not constrained by gravity, and that one really wants to go far away. So as we go higher, here comes the wind. Wind blowing, yeah? So the more dense, less dense, less dense, even less dense. And I will use another blue. Now, the ether, the last element, is a bit different from these four, because I mentioned it's quite special. It connects all of them. Ether, it's described as vibration, like waves. Different from the waves of the sea. They are just vibration. And of course, we can see vibration everywhere. We can see vibration in the waves of the sea. We can see how particles which vibrate at a certain frequency, the body has more temperature or less. So fire, being something hot, is determined by the vibration of the particles. You can see the particles in the air which are vibrating, and even in the dense matter like earth, there is vibration. So vibration is everywhere. That's why also it's on top of the 5-pointed star. We don't put number 5 here. We put 5 up here. Now it's everywhere, and it's just a matter of how strong or soft the vibration is, let's say. So we say that denser forms vibrate slower than higher forms. So air would be vibrating at much higher frequency than earth. Let me just put a few waves here on the 5. So vibration. So that's one way to see that there is a certain order of the elements, from more dense to less dense up to 5. And I mean, here you're moving through the star, maybe it's easier to see it here, but yes, more dense, less, and the more subtle would be the ether. In fact, we can even perceive. I mean, when we get to the air, already we cannot see the air. The air is invisible. Do you remember that vision is something that is linked to number 3, like 3 and 7, 7 colors of the rainbow, but also 3 primary colors. So when you are perceiving through the 5 elements, but 1, 2, and 3, up to 3, we can see them. You can see the earth, you can see the water, you can see the fire. But beyond 3, that's beyond the 3 primary colors, when we get to the 4, which is air, we don't see the air, unless inside has particles of dust, which is earth. So the air itself is invisible. We can only feel it by the touch. So that's going to give us a clue that air is linked to touch. So how about, even though I didn't want to go into that now, but okay, we already seen it, so let me put it here. So the more higher we go, the more subtle it is. This, we can still feel it with the touch. When we get to the ether, being vibration, that we cannot even feel it with the touch. Well, more or less, but it's much more difficult. I mean, if you are next to some speakers, you can feel them touching your skin, let's say. There is a sense of feeling of vibration on the skin. But the vibration, the main way that we connect to vibration is through hearing, listening. So that would connect to the listening. I'm going a little bit out of order now because I just jumped into the 5 senses, but I will come back to that. I was just saying that this is more dense and therefore this is more subtle, and we can associate it to the elements in this way. There's other ways to associate that. For example, Earth by itself. Earth has no life. Earth, you can think of Earth like the desert, like a rock, barren of life. In order for life to occur, there needs to be water. That's where fertility happens. You can think of the chakras as well, yeah? The second chakra is the sexuality. Second chakra is the womb, where the mother can hold the baby inside. So Earth by itself it has no life. It needs water to nourish the Earth. Now, in the beginning of life in the planet, if we think about it, it wasn't just that there was some earth and there was some water. There had to be heat from the sun. The heat heating the particles of water, and within the water would be microorganisms that would start to form as microorganisms and unicellular organisms at first, and then more complex organisms. But it started with, there's some earth, there is water, which is a primary ingredient for life, and then there is heat. So the heat was nurturing the water. Heating the water was good for the life in the water. And it's like, when we want to keep something fresh, we keep it in the fridge. We keep it cold. If you keep it outside in the sun, in summer, you will see all the bacteria and everything will start growing very quickly, and depends on what kind of food particularly, will start rotting very quickly. So you see how this is nourishment. The water is nourishing the earth and maturing it, and the fire is nourishing the water. Well, if we look at the touch, the air is nourishing the fire. If you want to nourish the fire, you just have to blow on it. And that blowing is going to increase the fire. Just like increasing the fire nourishes the water, just like increasing the water nourishes the earth. So there is a cycle of nourishment among the 4 elements in this way. But in the same way, a little bit of it nourishes, but too much, it can do the opposite effect. So too much wind will blow out the fire. Too much fire is going to dry and evaporate the water. Too much water is going to erode and dissolve the earth. So you see how there is a cycle of nutrition and a cycle of distraction through the 4 elements. That's going to be extremely useful when we study other things which have the number 1 and number 2 and number 3 to understand the dynamic relationships between them. And one example would be if we are talking to somebody and we apply some yogic philosophy behind, or maybe you know something about Ayurveda or Chinese medicine or something, you have learned the 5 elements. And then you're listening to the person and you can identify that they are having a mixture between earth and fire. And the earth and the fire are a little bit out of balance in them. Well, okay, good, interesting. You picked up something. What do you do with that? How do you put it into balance? And do you have to remove earth and fire? Do you have to add air and water? Do you have to take one and put an... What do you do with that? It's very hard to have a, let's say, healing relationship to the person through the elements by themselves. It can tell us a lot, but fire and water, fire and earth, what is that? Is lava? What do I do with lava? That person has an excess of lava. That doesn't make any sense. Now, if you know numbers, and as we start exploring the language much more, you will see that here you will not have one word. You will have 2, 3, 4, 5 pages full of words, concepts that are all associated to this number. And by seeing that there is an excess of something like fire or something like fire, you will say, well, an excess of this means this, and a whole list of things. And because we know the dynamic relationships between the numbers, like for example, the relationship of nutrition, like fire nurtures the water and the air blows and increases the fire. If you know that, you will know that that's the relationship between these qualities within the other person. That's going to be very, very interesting ideas and, let's say, a deeper perspective into what somebody is experiencing without them knowing about it. They speak words and you hear the numbers, you hear the elements and you hear the numbers, and then because you know the relationship between the numbers, then there's something guiding behind that you can utilize it to guide the conversation. And through the conversation, you can help the person asking questions, and the person exploring those questions may find some new balance within them. And this new balance brings healing. And that's why the training in Karam Kriya, training understanding numbers, is a training for consultants, for people who want to utilize words as a therapeutic approach to bring healing into the conversation. Because there is no other way. As you are learning numbers and you learn to be more coherent with your language and avoid the corruption of the language, that's also going to help the other person to bring coherence to themselves. And it's healing. It brings healing. So that, to me, that's very, very interesting. We have seen the cycle of nutrition and the cycle of distraction. You can see how if the fire is nurtured by air, but that also means that the fire eats the air. Yeah, the fire wants to consume the air. And this is very important why 3 and 7, meaning the mind, can very easily consume 4 and 6, meaning consciousness. We can see 4 is linked to the air. We can even see it, look, the element of air aligned with our lungs. The element of fire aligned to our digestive fire. The element of water linked to our sexuality, and that's water equality. And the element of earth linked to our stability. Yeah, and it's even earth, the earthy elements that come out of the body after eating. Like when you go to toilet, that's the earth coming out of you. So you can see that there is so much more linked to the elements within the human body. And if we were going like this, the element of air being the lungs next to the heart, that's where the consciousness happens. This is the part that brings us consciousness, breathing in, breathing out deeply. That's going to help to increase the consciousness. Now, that's air. And we just said that 7 was mind. 7 is fire. Yeah, because maybe I didn't say it, but Okay, let me make it more explicit. This is 3, but it's also 7. This is 1, but it's also 9. This is 4, but it's also 6. This is 2, but it's also 8. And this is 5, and it's also 10. So the 7 being the mind being fire, 4 being air, air being consciousness, fire consumes oxygen. The mind consumes consciousness. So just very simply, we can see that the more that we think about something, the easier it is for us to go away with the mind, identify ourselves with what the mind is saying, and forget to remain conscious of what the mind is saying. And this is the link between mind and consciousness that we explored in detail in the course on the mind. How do words equate to the numbers, though? Is it through the letter count or the word meaning associated to the elements? Letter count or the word meaning associated to the elements? Yes, it's the meaning. It's not about how many words, how many letters it has, because you can see different languages will have different number of letters. In English, fire would be 4, but in Spanish would be fuego, it would be 5. So it doesn't connect. So, we have a number of qualities that we can associate to fire. The warmth, the heat, the burning quality, the drying quality, all these qualities are the same in any language, whatever word we use to talk about that. So all those qualities will all be associated to that number. And you can feel it when you think too much, the head gets very hot, for example. And you can become a very drying person. You know, somebody who is very intellectual and very thoughtful and thinking, being next to them is like very dry. And you may feel, well, where is the emotion in the person? It's too intellectual, too much into the mind. More emotion would be more the language of energy in motion. Motion is movement, like the waters which are moving. The motions move like water. So this is a more emotive person, emotional person. So it's the quality that it's being. Does it make sense, Infinite Stories? Is that what you were asking? So we look at the quality of every element, and then we can associate those quality to the number. All right, we saw a number of ways that the elements relate to each other. Again, we can then bring all this into the chakras and understand the chakras a bit better as well. That's something we can link. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, good. Yeah, ask anything. Yeah, whatever I'm saying, if it doesn't make any sense, please ask. So yeah, I just mentioned earth and water and fire, but we can see much more as we are exploring the different qualities. We will see how they connect to the body. But hopefully it makes sense. To me, this is when it becomes more magical. When you start to observe how everything is aligned, everything makes sense. Look, we could very easily have our lungs down here and our kidneys up in the throat. We don't. Why are the kidneys down there? I mean, they are more in the back, yeah? They are down here, but they are connecting it to the bladder. But they are in between the region of the second chakra. Why? Why do we have the lungs here? I mean, they have to distribute the oxygen bring the oxygen to the heart. It makes sense that it's close to the heart, but that's the thing. It makes sense. It's harmonic. It's natural. Everything is natural. But we could have the lungs down here. We don't. The digestive system could be up in the head. We could have the brain in the belly. We do have a brain in the belly, actually, but you know what I mean? But it doesn't. There is a natural design. this is natural. The way the body works is natural. This is natural. And when we are operating within the natural design, everything works fine. Everything is perfectly harmonious. We live life in harmony with nature. The moment we start twisting things around, and we do that with our language and with our behavior, that's when we start having problems. So that's the thing. Start to find this magical meaning that is all connecting everything. Well, since I already started with the 5 senses, let me carry on with them. Let's write the others as well. Listening is linked to vibration, is linked to the 5th chakra, and speaking as well. So it's connecting the 4th chakra being air, and the air helps us to sense we sense it through the touch, the sense of touch. Touch is also connected to the 4th chakra, because when we are opening our hearts, we want to touch people. We want to hug them. We want to touch them. We want to give them a caress. You know, I see my daughters and I want to touch their cheeks and give them a kiss. Right? It's the heart is opening. When your heart opens, you want to hug people. The arms are an extension of the heart. So any yoga posture that we are working with the arms, we are effectively working on the 4th chakra. And, in the yoga world, we hug a lot. You go to yoga class and no matter which culture, we give hugs, which sometimes gets me into trouble when I travel to Muslim countries that maybe they are more traditional or the traditions are more refrained. Or I go to even to Nordic countries. When I travel there, sometimes some people are more... They are not so quick to go and hug. And I'm Spanish, so my blood is very warm. And they're like, yeah, let's go for a hug. But not everybody's like that. So this connection to the heart, it's heart and touch, and the sense of touch. The 3rd element, fire, would be very simple connection as well, because fire gives light, and light allows us to see things. So... vision. Listening, well, it should be hearing actually, because not everybody who hears listens, but okay, never mind. Listening, vision, touch, vision. Let's go to the second. Second is water. And the 5 elements, the one that is more connected to the water is the one that happens in the mouth. That's the sense of taste. It requires some water. There's some water quality. And water is also having good taste. It's like knowing what you want and what you don't want. It's like this, okay, this I don't. So it's like this discrimination, which is linked to number 8. You see 2 aspects to the number 8 or to the 2. This I want, this I don't want. So it's like yes, no, yes, no. It's more about saying not to this, not to that. Sadam, Ola Infinity, hello, welcome. We are doing number 5 today. And so the taste sense would be associated to the water element, and finally smell is associated to the earth element, like smelling the earth, smelling the root, the seeds. You see, when we are sometimes a sense of smell, you may be walking in a new country and you're walking around the street and suddenly there is this smell that comes to you and it triggers a very old memory from when you were little. And you don't know where it comes from. It triggers that memory, something very old, very ancient. It's like going back to going back to the beginning. So smell can connect very much down to the beginning. So smell would be something connected to number 1 and the earth. It's not a very nice way, but it's a way that you will never forget. I use this image when I'm teaching these courses in the yoga trainings. I say, when 2 dogs meet each other, which chakra do they smell? Do they smell their heart? Or do they smell another chakra? I leave that question with you. That's a good way to remember that's the chakra that they smell. So smell is associated to the 1st chakra. That's something for helping to remember how to associate them. Well, that was a very early beginning of introducing. We talked about how we came from 7 to 5, and then we started to explore the most basics of the pillars of our understanding of the vocabulary of every number. This is going to be the basis. We're going to have to introduce a few more things here, and we will start from the next video on building a little bit of the dictionary of words, starting to learn a few more words which are things which are number 5, and they're going to be fundamental for us to understand numbers better, and we will go from there. But for today, I think it's enough. This was quite nice that we got here, 5 elements and 5 senses. We will continue building upon this on the next week. And yeah, I'm excited. We have so many beautiful things ahead of us on number 5: communication, exchange, relationships, marriage. Find is the number of paradox, finding paradoxes when there is a polarity or a duality. We have a lot of things like this to explore. But for today, we will take a break. We'll stop here. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and share it with others. Thank you everyone for being here. Infinite Stories, Naam. Thank you Infinity and everybody who was watching. Thank you everyone who is supporting the stream, being a member as well. I appreciate that. Until next time, Sat Nam.